Jiva, for this, and thank you very much for inviting us. And also thanks to Sabina and to XOP Association. We are very pleased that all of you are joining us for this webinar, and we are looking forward to collectively expand the understanding of idea of care and to question its discrepancies and try to discuss what does the term imply or provokes.
Thank you. Thank you, Irena. Thank you, Jiva, as well, for organizing this webinar. And maybe I just start with thanking all the participants as well for joining us today in the sea of the many webinars that are taking place on the internet. So thank you for joining us. And we hope that as the session concludes, we will be able to recognize whether care is present in our institutions, organizations, working groups, collaborations. And if it isn't, then what are the ways in which care can find access and a sustained dwelling into our spaces? Irena, would you like to maybe start with introducing ourselves?
First, we will introduce ourselves, and then we will actually go through the structure of the seminar. So my name is Irena Borić, and I'm actually an art historian working as an art critic and curator. And I'm living in Maribor for last 6 years, and I'm originally from Zagreb. And now I would actually like to mention my Zagreb experience, which was my early formative experience. So already as a student, it was really like, for us, it was very important to gain the knowledge on contemporary art elsewhere, like on other places that was not really university, because university was kind of failing to provide that kind of knowledge. So we were actually depending on a myriad of independent art and activist organizations that were actually providing some kind of, I could even call it like a parallel curriculum that was very important for us. And based on this kind of experience, for us, it was very logical to kind of start doing our own projects that had more to do with kind of sense of urgency rather than maybe how are we going to get paid from that. So in that sense, it was really important like to self-organize and to self-educate, and all these projects were also based on mutual friendships and kind of shared interests in particular themes or topics. And basically coming from this kind of amateur position, and I'm saying amateur because it really had to do a lot with love, it came out to have now these positions professionalized. And what is important, especially for independent art scene actors, is that now you have them like there for already some 20 years or so, that they really created working conditions in which everybody who participates, for example, needs to be paid properly. And this is particularly related to artists who often like for example, if exhibiting in mainstream institutions, they don't get anything except the symbolic capital, while here these independent organizations, no matter how the fee is small, there is always a fee. So this is like this, taking this ideological position. And based on this experience, I'm actually always keen to work within collectives. And these collectives sometimes take place like from, you know, a few months to a few years. It really depends. And I really appreciate this kind of structure which collective brings in, which is always about collaboration and negotiation and dialogue, but also support and care. And for that, I actually really appreciate this opportunity that it was actually how this webinar came together, which was actually collaboration with Vidha. And this, I think, it was a really nice process. Also, before Vidha will introduce herself, I would just like to mention that here my position is not really an academic one or of a researcher, because my position here comes more from a curatorial perspective, in a sense of being interested in this kind of topic that is relevant in this actually perplexed conditions of contemporary times. And as you may notice, there were quite a lot of events within art and cultural scene that were kind of taking care into consideration as a topic. One of these was actually this week by Axioma, and it was like addressing also solidarity as disobedience. And then there is also upcoming week an event about care as in a form of workshops that will take place at at HKW. I think it's also going to be online, but it's organized by HKW, so maybe it's also something that you would be interested in. So Vidha, please.
Thank you again for the introduction, and maybe I just start also with what it means really for me to be here today in terms of just the kind of time that we are all going through together globally, each part of the world, I guess, affected in slightly different ways, but there is a common understanding of care in, again, like either it is from the point of view of health, or it is from the point of view of what governments or societies are offering, either in sort of dialogue with each other, or actually in almost opposite ways of each other. So, but maybe I also now approach the webinar, and I will start with introducing myself. So, my name is Vidha Saumya. I am an artist and poet based in Helsinki currently. I moved to Helsinki in 2016 to pursue a master's degree program at Aalto University. Before joining the university, I worked as an exhibition coordinator and graphic designer for a contemporary art gallery in Mumbai. While working at the gallery, I also pursued my art practice, and I continue to do so. I was employed at the art gallery for around 7 years, and 7 years is a long period to gain skills for making an exhibition and for acquiring an understanding about various methods, tools, techniques required to create an exhibition that is satisfying both to the artist, to the gallery, as well as something that creates a congenial environment for the visitors to be in the space and experience art. So, but these years also made me think about how we could have done this work better. And by we, I mean myself, the gallery's director, the housekeeping staff, the administrator in charge, along with people who provided us services from time to time for the setting up of an exhibition, whether they were the painters, the carpenters, the lighting assistants, those who did the vinyl lettering, those who did the catering, those who took care of the transport, packing of the works, cleaning of the works, etc. It requires a rather elaborate team to create and manage an exhibition. And it only scales up in bigger institutions such as museums and biennales. However, in smaller, more independent and artist-run spaces, all these tasks that usually require a large number of people to carry them out often have to be taken care of. So I was just saying that often these tasks that are usually carried out by a large group of people or a large number of people in more independent or sort of smaller organizations actually fall in the hands of quite a modest team. Sometimes it can just be 2 people or sometimes even 1. And this long winding explanation actually is to tell you also that I became acutely aware of this disbalance only after I moved to Helsinki and joined a program where I was studying alongside curators, organizers, and artists. And by working with them, engaging with their concerns, and even asking them something as simple as, what do you do all day? I realized that along the way that I'm not alone in this struggle. and I'm not alone in this resistance towards the establishment. And I also had the good fortune of working closely with curators who brought care into their curating. And so I slowly converted. I converted from being an artist who thought of the curator as some kind of an arch enemy to becoming friends with them. And by becoming friends, it meant that we got into a conversation. We looked at the exhibitions together as a space of co-learning. And aspects of this co-learning is what, along with Irena, I'm hopeful to share with you through the support of Vidha, Sabina, and XOP organization. I would also like to take this moment to thank Nunnut curators, Selina Valihekki and Orlan Ohtanen, Innovate curators, Ramina Habibullah and Nayab Ikram, Taru Elfing, Feminist Culture House, Sonia Linfords, curator of Urban Appa, Satu Herala and Arvind Ramachandran. These are all curators and practitioners I've had some chance of interacting or working with. And they are really people who have been fundamental in introducing me to the aspect of care in practice and ways of working.
Thank you, Vidha. So now before we introduce the structure of the webinar, we will actually read 8 safer space guidelines, which we actually composed together, Jiva, Vidha and me. And we used as a base guidelines that already exist from 3 associations and organizations from Helsinki, which are Urban Appa, Poimu Studio, and the Museum of Impossible Forms. So will you share screen?
Yes.
Now Vidha and I will read the guidelines. Respect others and their boundaries.
Try to be conscious of the space you take and the positions from which you speak.
Don't assume that you can tell a person's gender, sexual orientation, life situation, identity, health status, background, etc. without them telling you.
Make space for listening.
In accordance with intersectional ways of working, it is good to acknowledge your own privileges.
We come from different experiences, cultures, and situations in life. We differ in opinion.
We acknowledge that language is imperfect, and we are bound to have misunderstandings. Sometimes we use different words to describe the same things, or vice versa, and same words to describe different things.
We recognize and acknowledge our failings and the subjects we do not understand. So we will move towards the structure for today.
So today we will actually make introductions of each of the participants in a way that each person should say their name, their pronoun, and something that you may notice today. After that, after the round of introductions, we would go to collectively read the text Spiritual Hunt by Jacqueline Maybe, and we would actually read just a little excerpt from that text, and then we would think together about care and answer some questions based on the text, but also on our experiences. And after that, we would go through key concepts that reflect where the presence and the absence of care. After that, we would then go into practical and poetic perspectives on care.
And then comes a very good part of the webinar, which is that we will take a small break. And it'll be a very short break, but after the break, we invite you again to do a collective poetry exercise and read the poem that we will write together. We will read it together as well. After that exercise, we will conclude the webinar with a short discussion. We will basically open it up and see how it sort of moves into a direction of discussion or question answer, or something that you feel that wasn't properly addressed during the entire webinar. So we will have some time to also discuss that. So yeah, let's see how we flow today.
So we can start with a round of introductions. So I can be the first one. My name is Irena. My pronoun is she and her. And I noticed today there was a bigger traffic than usual.
Oh, maybe I could go next. My name is Vidha. My pronouns are she and her. And today I noticed that actually I didn't particularly notice anything different from yesterday, but I did notice that the dandelions that were flowering yesterday have already now started releasing the seeds and the pollen into the air. So that's quite a transformation overnight. Yeah.
My name is Jiva. My pronouns are she and her. And today I actually noticed that the weather is changing drastically from a minute to a minute. From sunny to storms, perhaps as an overall mood of this era that we live now in a way.
Hi, my name is Sabina. My pronouns are she and her. And today I noticed that my dog has a new friend. So yeah, she has a new friend.
My name is Maya. My pronouns are she and her. I noticed today that I cannot be in different spaces at the same time.
My name is Ira, and my pronouns are she and her. And I noticed very little today because I've been stuck with my computer writing an essay. So I'm noticing that I'm not noticing much when I'm with technology.
I guess I'll go next. I noticed the same thing. I am Shan. My pronoun is he and him, and I noticed that I noticed yesterday in the Black Lives Matter protest that I haven't seen some of my friends for 3 months. And I also noticed I spent too much time in front of a computer just now.
Hey, my name is Zahar. I'm living in Slovenia like 4 years now, so only Jiva here, so thank you. So and otherwise, really, I don't know about this program and these meetings, and only I know how we do care because I see the Facebook this link. But I'm listening to you all guys, and also I'm learning. So yeah, that.
Thank you, Zahir. Okay, I think it's all of us at this point.
Great. Okay, thank you everyone for the introduction. I think it was nice to meet everyone, even though through various screens. Okay, so we are now at the part of text, and this is a text from this essay called The Spiritual Hunt by Jacqueline Mabey. It was published online on the Creative Independent. And Irena and I selected a short piece which we will read together, first Irena and then myself. And then we will take some time to read it by ourselves soon after we complete doing this one. So Irena, would you like to begin?
Mm-hmm. The demand for presence, the endless unnecessary barriers to entry, and the persistent pernicious idea that you shouldn't be paid well for what you do if what you do is a creative calling. It all combines to create a chilling effect on who participates in the art world because it presumes financial independence and a frictionless life.
It lends itself to an art world that stays white, affluent, hetero and homonormative, able-bodied, cisgendered, risk-averse, and IMHO, boring as fuck, full of the children of the international elite who form new old boys networks that masquerade as Marxist reading groups. If you're not pale and male with a degree from Yale, a life in the arts is a gamble. Sorry, we will just spend some more time reading the text. So maybe let's take, like, say, a minute to read it by ourselves and think about the text. We will now move to the next step of the participation into this text. So if you look at this slide, you will notice that it is the same text, but it is with a request or with an instruction to search for a word, a phrase, or a sentence which in some way answers, comments, or makes a response to the following question. Where in your organization is care needed and where is it denied? So maybe since we've read the text together, if you feel that you would like to, I mean, just feel free. There is no real kind of order in which we will go in collecting the answers, but if at some point of time you feel that you can add something to it, please let us know.
If there is nobody else at this very moment, I could start.
Sure.
So yeah, for me, I think this last part, a life in the arts, is a gamble. I think this kind of wraps it out perfectly for my situation, which is actually where in your organization. I don't really have an organization, as I'm actually self-employed in the culture. And this is very particular position because, like, the Slovenian government encouraged this to put workers in culture basically in this kind of individualist entrepreneur kind of position. So in that sense, like, you can have as much as work as you like, you have certain privileges, but at the same time you are actually completely individualized, and you are out of you don't really have like a concrete structure which is really taking care of you. And this is really seen in two ways. One way is basically when it comes to the funding. So basically all the self-employed cultural workers are actually applying for the funding from, let's say, Ministry of Culture and city of Maribor in my case. And in that sense, they are actually competing against each other. And at the same time, like, the institutions are also applying with their own programs, so are again competing also with them. So that's again that kind of very neoliberal kind of aspect of this position. And on the other hand, I think that the care here, where would it be needed? It would be needed, especially, like, for example, now in the when pandemic actually came about, a lot of artists and cultural workers stayed without job, or that they are the certain work was postponed. And in that sense, it was really that they really needed to somebody take care of them, like somebody, meaning institutions. But all the work actually was done by individuals who came together and put a pressure on the Ministry of Culture so that there is some kind of help guaranteed. And to me, it seems here that the care is kind of missing more from the side of the concrete institutions that could actually make some kind of more systematic change. And the other aspect which I would mention in this case of self-employed in the culture is basically this aspect when you can get a sick leave only after 31 days. So that means really that you are first of all, if you get sick, you don't work, and that again goes so you don't earn money, you don't make money, and at the same time you are maybe refusing jobs or staying without work. So then again, this speaks about the fragility of this kind of position, and this kind of position would really need some kind of structural solutions to it.
Yeah, I think like that is something that is being witnessed also or seen in Helsinki. I mean, in Finland, there has been some kind of support, I think, from the cultural sector, I mean, privately as well, and as well from the government side. But I think overall, and a lot of independent practitioners in Finland would also know that there is like this push from various organizations and from the governments and from institutions for artists to become entrepreneurs. And it's always disguised under this idea of doing, you know, some kind of light entrepreneurship. But it's really like such a trap into like almost saying that you are not really working unless you are, you know, making a profit, or unless you are again like another kind of a corporate entity. So it's something really kind of pertinent that you pointed out. Ira, maybe would you like to say something?
Well, I'm based in Sydney actually, and well, we are actually in a bit of a lucky position because government has given us some money, like a subsidy to live off monthly, which I find pretty enough to live from. I lived on half of that before. I'm a curator and journalist by profession, and in between of my delving into art world, I worked for 10 years in various art organizations that organize public talks and programs. So I was employed on, you know, salary basis. And it's interesting, while I had some safety, I guess, in financial sense back then, I can't say that I felt cared for. And I decided to stop working and finish my current studies, focus on that and focus on curating and go into freelance. And that kind of left me in a position of self-care, which I was able to exercise more than when I was working for the machine. So yeah, I'm not sure how to, I'm still, I guess, kind of in a position of contemplating that a bit, and I'm not sure where I'm at with it, but yeah, I'm not in a rush to go back into that kind of care that's based on save money. But I'm also emphasizing that I'm lucky to be getting some money from the government. And also what I want to say there is that although we are getting that everyone here still complains. And I'm not complaining as much because I actually come from Croatia. So I know what things could be like. And it just makes me realize that human nature is to complain regardless of what you have, in a way, because people here have it pretty okay and they still want more and they're still unhappy with what the government is doing. So it's interesting to also observe that.
Thank you. Would somebody else like to add something to this?
I kind of want to respond to the topic of art entrepreneurship, and also in the article it mentioned the demand for presence, the unnecessary barriers to entry, and the presumed financial independence. This kind of all culminates into basically Instagram. What for me, like how artists, because Instagram was kind of, or online media in general was kind of seen as this kind of free space for artists to express themselves. Well, I think back in the 90s or in the early 2000s, we had this fantasy of them being this utopic space. But now it's become a space where it's almost like artists have to present themselves constantly on this media to keep almost their relevancy, and presence itself actually becomes financial independence, as in people are relying on like click rate and view counts to get their money from like platforms such as YouTube and Twitch. And I also see how there are some artists like Joshua Cinderella and Hong Kong artists like her surname is Mac, who actually is trying to get on this online platform to become a streamer, become a YouTuber, in a way to gain financial independence. almost in a defiance of like the traditional art world, networking and showing in exhibition and gallery. But this also becomes, I think, like how an artist career being so closely, I guess, closely linked to social media also becomes, as all we know, like this mental health issue of how this, I guess, this psychology of complaining, this psychology of constantly exposing yourself and constantly worrying about whether your presence, like your livelihood is relying on your presence online, becomes a mental health issue. It's almost like creating art and your artistic career, it's also inherently a mental health issue.
Yeah, I would agree. Mm.
I just wanted to comment. I also work as an artist, but I'm employed in a public institution. That now I have during the Corona crisis, it's this question of care comes up with in relation what will happen now after, because this could be an opportunity to basically really work towards the idea of making a more collaborative art space instead of entrepreneurial, but I worry that it will in fact accelerate, and that institutions will become even more under this neoliberal agenda, because this crisis will now become an excuse to make to change the working schedules, to cut budgets, so I think it's important this how we will implement care, because me working as an institution, we are basically dependent on the system, and the system, I think, will use this to create even more precarious conditions for work.
Thank you, Maya, for your observation as well, because I think from all the things that have been said so far, also, it's really interesting to see how the chain of thoughts also are sort of really connecting one to the other. It's really telling of where we are all together in this situation. But yeah, Jiva, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, very short. I thank you, Vidha, and all of you who shared your thoughts. So as Vidha said, now the train continues, and perhaps first to point out just the beginning of this paragraph, the demand for presence, and also to relate to what Shong said, and for also in this psychological point of view, this kind of presence online when it becomes an issue, and also a mental health problem. But also for me, and I work as a curator in an NGO, which during the pandemic, we actually continued the work like nothing happened, to be honest. Just we did not do the public events. But I also have I noticed the really big increase again, of course, in the bureaucratization of these professions, organizers, curators, producers, artists, and so on. And of course, it's something that in a way it's logical to expect that in the system that we live in, there will be not understanding to decrease, let's say, the level of bureaucratization and administration that we do, and usually it takes 80% of our time anyway, from like this hegemonic institutions that also finance us and so on. To expect certain levels of understanding, and also taking in consideration that all cultural workers, especially workers in any kind of field, I would say right now, especially people like working class, it's a big psychological pressure, as it was mentioned already, but then this adds another layer to it. And in this actually, to be honest, in this period, I noticed something that probably I was not noticing before as well. It's also relations between us, if I say us, so people who know each other also in certain cultural circles, to put it like this. I noticed also this kind of, in a way, not a contest, but this kind of, you know, I work more, like it became the only conversation we can have, and the only value of one person, only through that you push yourself so far that you're burned out, that, you know, it became sort of like value. Oh, you burned out because you work so hard, you know, respect. So it also became this kind of, for me, as a sign also how we're pressured to this, and how this influences also this kind of relations between people who are all in the same, of course we're not always the same, all in the same boat, but this kind of perhaps lack of solidarity, if I express myself like this.
Yeah, it's been like just listening to everyone. I think this is something that Irena and I were also, as we were discussing how to, you know, sort of bring this webinar together. I think there was, it really becomes kind of difficult to put your finger on where exactly is care needed. I think it is a difficult question for all of us, because maybe we have in so many ways internalized ways of not caring, that it becomes also a painful exercise to confront, okay, is this an area of my life where attention has not been paid, whether it is through work, at a workplace, or even just as how we are having to manage our careers in that sense. So, but thank you for also sharing. It is not, it's not easy to share such things. Maybe we move forward with our presentation as well. So, so we wanted to introduce these key concepts, and why we have called them key concepts is because, I mean, as most of us, I guess, in different ways have, you know, heard presentations, talks, you know, all kinds of things, even in media. So the key concepts are usually these really heavy terminologies that one needs to understand. And so we thought that we could turn it over its head and introduce some smaller concepts that have somehow left our space of work. And so the first being taking a break. So this is something that was one of the first things that came up when Jiva, Irena, and I were talking about webinars and what kind of space it creates. And I think one of the most, something where it really, you kind of feel that, okay, now as a webinar, you're in a very odd space, is that you don't really, if you have put your, say, camera on, you don't really leave the space, which maybe if you were attending this webinar, like this seminar in person, you would feel a lot more freer to even walk out, or, you know, step out for something else, or leave it midway. But there is this increased performativity by being in a space. And so we wanted to talk about taking a break. So whenever you feel like it, take a break, even if it is to breathe, even if it is to drink a glass of water, or to just yeah, stare into the sky and think about nothing. So there is that. Then
yeah, making space.
Mm-hmm.
Making space in a sense that you are aware that you are not the only person here present, but there are also others, and then not really like paying attention to everybody who is present, and giving enough space for somebody to speak, but also giving the space for listening.
Yeah. And the third is saying sorry. This is something that comes with a lot of difficulty, I understand. I think even in young children, one notices that to say sorry is something that you really realize quite early in life is some kind of a compromise or some kind of a stepping back. And I think in adult life or in professional life, it really sort of the pressure in both ways really increases. But in some way, we were also thinking that perhaps, like if the word sorry is constructed in a very simple, actionable sentence, what could it be? And this is something that I have learned from Sonia Linfors, who from Urban Appa Festival, where it can be something as simple as saying, I am sorry, I messed up, I will try better next time. And so we wanted to leave you with these three concepts. And then we sort of very almost quickly come to this aspect of care in the context of hospitality. Irena, would you like to maybe take it forward?
We would like to pose some of the questions. Some of them were actually already presented within the context of rehearsing hospitality project, but we really like them and we found that they are important to address them also within this seminar. So what is the work that is always present? Who is in your organization? Who in your organization acts out hospitality? Who has the keys? Who opens the space? Who cleans, cooks, makes coffee, fills water, empties the dishwasher? Who is available for help and for questions? So now you are invited to answer.
Yeah, maybe I could share a small incident from one of the organizations or spaces that I am part of, which is Museum of Impossible Forms. And when we opened the space 4 years ago now, we still actually don't have permission from the city to install, like a bigger wash basin or a sink to wash dishes. So we just have like this little hand washing basin in the common space of the kitchen. And so when we opened the space, and because food is such an important part of the Museum of Impossible Forms, we thought it could be good to install like a bigger sink so that we can wash pots and plates and those kind of things. And then that idea kind of came and went, and we followed up with the city, and the city wasn't allowing it, still hasn't given us permission. And so then we were discussing the possibility of getting a dishwasher. And as decisions get taken in any kind of a large group, it always kind of, everybody talks about it and then nobody really takes the decision. And it was only after, several events, and also when these several events changed hands in terms of who was organizing it and who was taking care of the cleaning up after the event, that only once everybody had really done that work, it was almost in unison that, in one of the meetings, everyone said, hey, before anything else, let's get a dishwasher. And it was also a moment for me to, it really kind of made me understand that, yes, it is just so difficult to really understand what the other person's tasks are if one has never done it. And like some of these questions that you see in front of you today were brought up by this curatorial duo called Nunnut, where they were asking these questions. And one of the possible solutions to something like this was this idea of switching roles, and what would happen if the person responsible for doing the cleaning was one day opening the space, or the person who's always responsible for opening the space is taking care of the technical, setting up of the projector, and so on and so forth. That perhaps the switching could really introduce or make us recognize what the other person is also doing. So yeah, I thought of sharing this with you.
If anybody would like to address these issues.
To be honest, like in some cases here, I can totally say everyone on some questions, of course. But then it also depends on the public events. For example, we have in the institution where I work, and now, of course, now with this new regime of hosting public events and being open for public, in a way, the whole system crashed. Also because the working hours are shorter, but shorter for the moment for the time when the gallery is open, for example. But that doesn't mean that the office doesn't still work when the gallery space, the exhibition space, it's closed. So, for example, I would say that here there are, again, I also would say that this depends a lot on a individual person in certain level, because it has to do with how one sees the notion of understands the notion of labor, what labor means to them, and what are the tasks, I wouldn't say tasks, but what are the things that the person also in a way feels comfortable doing, but also in a way feels not obliged, but sorry, that's not the right word, but perhaps the things that don't seem beneath them. Because I noticed that especially in this Western European context, this hierarchy is quite clear in institutions: who opens the space, who cleans, who cooks, who is the one who speaks with the guests, and so on. This especially, I would say, in public institutions, from my experiences. But when also you when you work in NGOs, these relations are different. So it depends, I think, on the organizational structure anyway. But yeah, just a quick observation.
Does anybody else want to maybe say something or put a question forward that you don't see here? Like there is this thing and you haven't written it, which could come either in the aspect of hospitality or as there's this artist called Egle Odo who also runs an art gallery in Helsinki, and I was just speaking to her once about how to really manage a space when you're working in a large group. What could be the ways in which things could be done with some level of not causing kind of friction all the time. And she said that running a space is really like the maintenance of a living room. So no matter what else is happening in the rest of the space, you still have to make this appearance, and usually it falls on just one or two people having to do that repeatedly. So I mean, not that that's some kind of an ideal one should hold up to, but it really kind of made me realize also about the practicalities of running a space. That yes, there will be time to time where there's just one person who's really doing everything.
For me, it was really it's always like this kind of two positions. So one is when there is no budget. When there is no budget, then everybody does everything, like from cleaning of the space to cleaning of whatever you do, like writing text, doing the whole thing. But then when there is a budget, then there are more clear divisions of work. Then there is more paid work, in a sense of you have a cleaning lady who comes and cleans the space. So there is this is more clear. And then there is I guess it also kind of has to do maybe with the amount of work. For example, if you have an institution and the budget and quite a large program, I guess then there is less space for doing the cleaning. So basically, if you have a budget, basically you pay somebody who does that very well. I found that an interesting example, what they did at Casco, they actually had this conscious decision to do the cleaning together after their weekly meeting. But I like it, the aspect that they are all doing it together. So it's not like they're exchanging or something like this, but it's rather like a collective exercise in cleaning that is something which is part of taking care of the space, basically in a different way.
Thank you so much. I see the text, and I don't know, really, it's hard for me because I'm not in, but like, you know, but also I get something, but I mean, if I say like normally about this text, like, I mean, who is your organization, like about this text also before, so I don't know what I should say, like about answer or something, like, because I write all of to your text also, and like about self-care, and I don't know, in the second, like mental health and NGO and space and all of them. So, but I don't know, I have to say from where exactly. And so I followed all your, I mean, you're talking about this story, and I listened. So, but I don't know, little, because, you know, I mean, I want to say, like, I'm not full update, you know, that's why, I mean, I cannot say something. So, yeah, because usually, I mean, to my life, you know, I'm 26, 7 years right now, maybe it's funny, but I mean, it's not, I'm not finished my high school or primary school, you know, so that's why. But I listen and I follow to everything really. So which one? I mean, I understand, like, you know, how it's going in this situation, and you know, about this program and text and everything. And
Sure. No, but thank you for also making that observation. I think it is also important to take time to listen. Thank you for your comment, and also for being patient with all of this kind of reading and the text work. It's not, again, like, this is really something that we were also trying to put together from the point of view of opening up the space to even talk about these things. Irena, would you like to maybe go forward with this care
curious,
from...
like, if somebody else wants to say something about
sure.
this or not?
I would just like to comment that when public institution, you mentioned that it's more divided and the roles are more clear. But I think it's important also personal responsibility, how you yourself see, how you see your position in an organization. If you understand it in a more holistic, if you see it like as a social space, and you acknowledge the roles that everyone have in this space, I think you can go beyond this hierarchy. But if you internalize only your role and you don't have the sensibility towards others, then it can be it can be problematic. But for me, it's important also your own responsibility, how you see the space.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe just as what Maya said, it really made a great point also for me, that it was this kind of responsibility and the awareness of one to also have this kind of solidarity with co-workers, or in a group, or in any kind of collaborative structure in a way. So is this kind of also, you know, seeing and recognizing, sometimes you don't even have to say, but recognizing the things that happen and what needs to be done. in this kind of organizations, for example, because we all know now, if we stay basically in, you know, just very basic example here, we're setting up an exhibition. We all know that usually at that point, prior to the opening, everything just goes into this mode where everything is just around the space. And this is, it's also a moment when one learns more about the awareness, more about negotiating with co-workers, colleagues, friends, whoever is the group that you're working with. It's also this kind of recognizing in the moment certain urgencies, certain also body languages, you know, this kind of also, let's say, activities or things.
I think maybe, is it that Ira wants to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking when what Maya was, in relation to what Maya was saying, that maybe this division of labor and responsibility is kind of designed to kill this sense of sensibility towards the oral situation. So in situations where it comes to a certain crisis, or as someone else was saying, you know, a day before the exhibition, everything falls apart, you suddenly have this right to lift your hands from the situation and say, well, that's not my role to handle that, which is not that, I think, innate actual response of taking care and fixing something, because the initial division of labor gave you this permission to say no to certain things because it's not in your job description.
Thank you, everyone, for these responses.
Vidha, sorry,
Yeah.
I just wanted perhaps to what Ira just said, or maybe
yeah. Yes, please.
Or like, if I understood right. So you were saying that care is also in a way of saying that you're not doing something because this is not part of your job description. Just perhaps I misunderstood, just so we're on the same.
Yeah, I think it gives you allowance. Having this concept, this structure of job division or responsibility division or job description is in a way designed to make us non-sensible to like innate caring for the overall situation, for the overall space, or yeah, I'm not sure how to express it, what I'm trying to say, but it seems like a desirable way to numb us in some way, to desensitize us.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, yeah, you expressed it very well. Thank you.
Yeah, so we just wanted to move forward also by just very quickly talking about care from a practical perspective and as well as from a poetic perspective, something that's kind of tied in also to of today's webinar. And so I maybe invite Irena to speak about it from the practical perspective, and then I will take it forward from the poetic perspective.
So you're all very much welcome to address the issue of care from practical perspective. One aspect that I actually chose is something which is kind of a little bit close to me because it has to do with the childcare. But I would actually just like to mention this example of art residencies, and art residencies that are mostly not really welcoming mothers. So in that sense, like and it's also like, I think this kind of moment of being able to, even though Maya, then you can comment on this from your perspective, because your residency actually invites cats and kids and everything. So it's really not so insensible in that sense. But most of the residencies are very explicitly saying that they don't want like partner even, and then especially not really like to bring in child. So then like for somebody who is a mother for, I don't know, first few years and so, has to decide whether to go or whether to apply in the first place, or whether to maybe leave the kid behind. So then there is this kind of moment of choice, like you cannot be both. You have to choose whether you are going to be like, I don't know, good mother, or you are gonna pursue your career. And to me, this, of course, there were also some examples that actually address this question. For example, one artist even had like this mothership residency, which she pursued like for 3 years. And what she did is actually that she said, well, you are on a residency at your own home. And then she collected these experiences from all these artist mothers from all over the world. And it was really like, what she emphasized through her project was actually to embrace her completely fragmented day and the ways of childcare that brings together with itself, to kind of be something that is kind of shaping the whole residency experience. So basically, I think what she did something what actually a lot of artists did, to kind of implement this experience within their work and to kind of talk about it, but with not without kind of saying, oh, I have to do this or that, but kind of to put this two together. But why I think these art residencies are something which would be interesting to mention here is also because art residencies really provide most like good conditions for work and for networking and for opportunities, and actually can be very relevant within somebody's artist career. So in that sense, to be omitted or even to kind of immediately be, you cannot really participate within this, it's already like, you are already like, you cannot be really part of that kind of structure. So you're already like somehow left behind. So yeah, this would be like one example I wanted to bring into this kind of practicalities. Of course, you can bring in many others example of for example, practical ways of where care can actually be, well, somehow denied. And I think this example of having a mother artist is really like, you know, somebody who is providing care is that for that care kind of discriminated because they cannot do other work because of the care work. So it's really,
Well, I also think that lots of female artists, or well, predominantly female, not to make any assumptions, also choose not to be mothers because of that issue. So yeah, I think it's great thing that you're mentioning. It's really important dialogue to have.
Also, sometimes perhaps it's not just the conscious decision, but it actually just, you know, time goes by and then there is just one moment of wait, what happened in between?
I kind of heard that kind of from one lady. I really appreciate.
Yeah, because I was thinking the other day when Irena and I had a meeting for something else, but I was thinking like how, yeah, like, okay, I come home at 8 in the evening, like where would be the time for this care, you know, while your care goes only in your institution in a way. I had a conversation with actually one person I met at the protests, and I have no idea who this person is. We just started to chat because we somehow ended in the same conversation, and she was actually addressing this issue of children going back to school now after the lockdown, and she had an experience where children was so afraid, asking herself and also her friends, because of course children are like sponges, asking like, am I going to die if I go to school now? So another pressure, another kind of burden that came through out of the whole situation. But somehow, anyway, I'm making this story too long. Somehow we came to this again, the situation of, okay, having children, but when? And and as so many people before, she said, you know what, it happens, and then you make it work. But
exactly.
Yeah, but this is also perhaps this kind of retrospective view when you're already in a way digested and think through also certain things that you, like this kind of residences you mentioned now, because in a way you needed to say no to this and to that because of this care. But then was no reciprocity of this care from the system or from the institutional side.
And that's exactly the problem, because there is no care coming from the institutions, then you have a problem. Because if the care comes from your circle with who you are working, and if the care comes like from institutions or like if there is a support system, there is no problem. But if there is no support system, for example, now also these 2 months being in quarantine with the kid, there is like, it's a struggle, like, because you are actually working now the whole day, childcare, it's the whole day, and then your work also somehow comes in between. So it's really like that kind of overlaps. But when there is a support system, then these things really can balance, like support from your partner, from partner to the institutions, and then it really works. It's really like, but without that, it's really difficult. Like, for example, this artist who did the motherhood residency was originally from UK and was in United States. And in United States, basically before 3, you have kid at home. So either you pay really big money. So it's really like difficult how to cope with that. And then like, again, pursuing your career. Also, I have colleagues, artists, they always have their girl together with them, because it's really like impossible to like, you know, okay, now she's bigger, but before it was really like she was like one part there, one part there. But then they had to also arrange that one of them actually had to work less. So like half time. So it was not possible to cope with both of them working for 8 hours. So.
I mean, we all see that this like bureaucratization of the culture industry and this push of art entrepreneurship, does not come with this kind of public institutional support system. In fact, I think the push of art entrepreneurship and the whole like freelancer lifestyle is actually becomes an excuse for public institutions to dodge this responsibility of not functioning actually. And so this kind of responsibility of care, of community care, becomes, it's kind of put onto individuals to care for each other. I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't care for each other, but it's work. Like caring, it's work. And I in this kind of wave of protest and also this freelance lifestyle, I see how public institution is pushing this kind of institutional care onto individuals. And what I see, it's kind of this conversation about care, it also becomes this conversation about self-preservation, because there's so many responsibilities that's put upon us that even the basic things of caring, I guess it becomes a huge part of our lives. I'm not saying that we should be we should just care about ourselves, but what I'm saying is what the stability that public institutions should guarantee us, it's kind of slipping away from our hands, and it becomes like a huge part of our work. And then we have to choose between doing our work and caring about like helping others and caring about others, which was supposed to be, which a large part of it was supposed to be taken care of by the public institutions. And so it put us into a really difficult position of constantly trying to do our job, but also to pick between caring and doing our job, and this kind of dilemma of self-preservation. When should we take ourselves away from this mode of like constantly caring and thinking about what we should do to take care of each other?
Yeah. I think it really also resonates very much, with what I wanted to actually put forward of looking at care also from this poetic perspective, because sometimes it just becomes very difficult to articulate these things. And for me, it has really been through the help of poetry writing or making poems that I find that these thoughts can really come together as a manner of suggestion, because to really confront the state or like the institution or the establishment, it's quite a difficult uphill task. But maybe it's a good moment for me to also share with you a very, very short poem. And it's not so much of a coincidence, but also because I selected it since Jiva is also part of this discussion, and this poem actually is dedicated to Jiva. It's from Book of Poems that I published earlier this year, and it's from the section called Watching Seagulls. And so this poem is called Biggest Curator, and it's for Jiva. So it goes like this. Biggest Curator. State as the exhibition maker. State putting structures together. State keeping people apart. State as the biggest curator. And yeah, I really wanted to share this also because we, kind of quite naturally really arrived at how care within our environment actually is often, when it is brought into the space, it is always looked at from this very top-down position. And actually all the points that Maya, Ira, Shong, like everybody has kind of proposed so far is really to start from bottom up. It's like these really basic small things that we need to attend to, and there the role of the state or the role of the government, the role of like these larger institutions really comes into place. But more often than not, it actually falls into the hands of independent workers who are anyways working quite precariously. But often the work of care is really pushed forward only by them. So yeah.
Vidha?
It's actually time. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just add something?
Sure.
Yeah. First, thank you. Now I just, I felt like we were in a Museum of Impossible Forms for one of our thesis seminars.
Sure.
Thank you. But now when you, just for the last thoughts you shared now, also perhaps this kind of what falls, like this notion of like the care that falls on the precarious workers, but also like this works if we go from individual level to the institutional one, in the sense of relations between the institutions. And here is again this kind of power relation between public institutions and NGOs, especially smaller associations, for example. And just a quick moment that happened a few years ago, it was that an association, a small one working internationally, with whom I worked for 5 years, we invited one artist from the States, and of course it's not cheap, let's put it like this, to bring someone from New York to Slovenia. And trying to find the best way to, of course, also respect and to assure conditions for the artists. We were trying to find institutional collaborators in this sense, and again the dialogue went to this direction. Oh great, you're inviting this person, we would love to host it, but yeah, you pay for everything, right? We're not doing this. But of course we accept everything else. So also here, you know, it goes from for the whole field in this sense as well. Sorry, just this. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that. So it is, well, we are doing kind of, I mean, more or less on time, but I think we have a break now for 7 minutes. And I'm really hoping that all of you can stay for the break and after the break. So we will just quickly take a break right now, and we'll see each other again in 7 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome everyone again.
We are back.
Perhaps most of us are back.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take this conversation forward, and as we had mentioned that we would look at maybe writing a poem together. There is no, don't feel intimidated by it or bored by it. I think it will be fun. So just to, yeah, so we come back to this text again, and we have read it now already twice over, but we were thinking that we could use this text as a reference to answer the same question that we had earlier, which was that let's look at this text to answer or comment or make a phrase or make a response to the question, where in your organization is care needed and where is it denied? So what I would invite you to do is to think about this, and through the help of this text or something that you would like to add from your own side, and we can use the chat box to kind of say our answers, or if you want to just say it out aloud also, it's fine. Jiva or I can make a note of it. So yeah, let's give ourselves maybe 3 minutes of time. I think that's like a good time. So we can use the chat really to collect our thoughts.
Can we send more than one, or we
Yes,
send...
of course. Of course. Yeah. More than one. And it can be like a word that you form as well. It doesn't. It can be something that's not there in this text as well. So I was thinking, what if we read this poem together? So now this is the fun part and maybe a bit awkward, but let's try to do this together. And I was hoping that we could read it all together. There's no pressure to stay in any kind of a rhythm. We don't have to like sing it like a chorus. We can speak or read this poem really at our own speed, at a way of reading something. But let's try to maybe read it out aloud. But again, there's no pressure if you really don't want to read it out aloud. But I was just thinking, like, let's confuse Zoom once and let's all speak at the same time. Okay. if that works for everyone. Let's start this.
Okay.
I speak about
care
of nature, sustainability issues, barriers to entry, financial interdependence, self-preservation,
picking your
battles, solidarity.
If I don't stay at work
I am not a bad worker if I don't stay at work every day until the evening.
Division of labor, delegating
Division of labor,
personal
delegating tasks,
participates,
sense of personal responsibility,
Will people in your life really
who participates,
stay and wait
have time
until
unnecessary
you have time
barriers.
for them, while
overwork
you overwork
yourself
yourself
Will
for
people in your
years
life
in order
really
to
stay
build
and
some
wait
average
until you
career?
have time for them, while you overwork yourself for
Care,
years in order to build
lack
some
of
average
time to
career?
rest,
competition,
Childcare,
everyone competes for
sleep,
lack of
small
time to
global brands.
rest,
We are made
sleep,
rejuvenate.
enemies.
rejuvenate.
It's go, go, go
It is a
mentality.
go, go, go mentality. Competition. Everyone competes for small pool of grants. We are made into each other's enemies. Wow, oh God, I got goosebumps. Okay.
I really like in how coming from various positions, various like backgrounds, but then we come to this kind of, you know, we see that it's so much commonality, and it makes like it's so coherent in a way, you know, like this bringing together these words into this poem, and especially now reading it out loud. Of course, every time reading it out loud or saying things out loud, they're more tangible in some way as well. And also,
and I especially like the addition of the long sentences. Thank you, Sabina, for those.
My pleasure.
Great. Yeah, so maybe it is time that we open it up for like a more discussion kind of a format. Thank you also very much for very patiently going through the various components. It was something that we wanted to really bring into the space of the webinar. This is so beautiful. But yeah.
Can I make a screenshot?
Yeah, fine by me.
I also like this word that was added, rejuvenate. Especially in the last days when I feel like physically exhausted as well with this, you know. Like...
No, it's really nice how it works well, like rejuvenate in the between of lack of complete time to rest and sleep that doesn't exist, and then competition. It's really, yes.
And also how, like, in a way, how it finishes with into each other's enemies, like very like on point with the like also this kind of maybe I feel like sometimes I appreciate when someone uses this kind of words, not, you know, competition only, but as kind of each other's enemies, because this is how the system is working. You know? It's this very much divide and rule system.
Yeah.
Also this feeling of guilt, of feeling guilty for taking to rejuvenate, or feeling guilty of, you know, getting a grant, or that means that someone doesn't get a grant. This kind of mentality also sometimes took a toll on individuals.
Yeah, and I think it also, like this last line, I think really puts it quite succinctly, that this understanding, and I think it gets brought up especially in the context of diversity. And actually I wanted to comment really on in the last webinar with Abdullah. Abdullah had actually really pointed it out quite like accurately, that he said that that one of the problems with especially institutions in the West.
Zahir, did you want to say something?
Can I put to a story in my Facebook?
It's fine by me, of course.
It's fine by me
it's
also.
Fine by me as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in this text is very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zahir.
And usually I don't have a lot of to say, because my biography, you know, I mean, everything is about like story refuge, you know, really. Otherwise, like, I don't know, like, also my biography, life to Slovenia, it's all friends, and from Maribor, Ljubljana, and little Zagreb, Rijeka, but sorry also about my camera, because I don't know why it's not working. So always it's not working. I don't know why.
It's okay. We can hear you. So.
And also, yeah, also I have to say thank you again, Jiva, for this website. Also, of course, you're working with Armina, this website to reach change. And yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, everything is like, we have like something new, and I mean, I put to my page on Facebook, so yeah, and that's why I'm so happy for this. And otherwise, this time, you know,
I'll put him.
I'm losing him.
I will write in the chat to Zahar. Just to add here, one thing that I'm super happy that Zahar also joined us today, because we actually have been, this is now we collaborated a few times already. Zahar was also our guest last year, and the international conference we had, which is more focusing on migrations in the context of the Balkan migration route. And he was also part of the touring residencies project, where we just had a presentation with the artists who were working and with Zahar. And we had some, one webinar as well. And they were titled Čardak on Screen. And they're also published on our social media and websites. So I want to take this opportunity to also thank Zahar to be so involved, and for your input and time, and this extraordinary wish to learn and communicate, and you know, to spend time also together. So finally this lockdown is down, now we can go from to another in Slovenia to see each other in person. So thank you, Zahar. Hvala.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Yeah, I was but maybe it's kind of like with Zahir's comments also, I think like maybe we've come to some kind of a close, but of course, like I'm here for, I mean, we are all here if there is something else that somebody would like to share or ask or discuss or comment.
Were you, I think you were saying also something prior to that, Vidha, and
I was just commenting on the last line of this poem that we've written together about that we are made into each other's enemy, and this is something that Abdullah had, you know, just kind of very accurately pointed out in the webinar, in the series of webinar, where he was saying this exactly, that how when one is looking at diversity work, or you know, trying to make a panel or trying to make an institution more diverse, there is somehow this understanding that you just need to bring that one person, and that if there are two people who are diverse, then it creates this kind of a competition, or like you can't, you know, that they're trying to cut each other or something like that. There is somehow this sense in institutions, organizations, even in working groups, that it's the inclusion of, like, say, a non-majority person is really then therefore becomes a bit of a token. And this really goes, therefore, to speak also about the idea of care, that you know, is care being introduced just as a token, or can it go beyond that? So, yeah, I just wanted to bring that forward.
Thank you. Perhaps if Ira, Sabina, Shong, Zahar, anyone has maybe some final. Shong, sorry. Did you? Shong, did you?
I was just like misclicking things.
Well, you know, it's a conversation starter as well. I would like to thank to everyone who participated today, and really grateful to Vidha and Irena for all of your effort, your work, your input, your thoughts you shared with us, and in such a webinar that was so beautifully also led through, like it led us, also us as participants, through this kind of flow of thoughts, and resulting in this poem that comes in such a heavy but also light way, you know, in a way of like putting it out, in a way of processing these things in a different format, which for not everyone is something that it's a daily format we use to express ourselves. So I really appreciate that we took time, and for your suggestion, Vidha, to actually do this. So thank you both.
I'm very glad to have the time and space to do it, and definitely to Jiva, you and Irena, for like really I mean, it was just such a pleasure working on something like this together. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you everybody, and Ira especially. Like, thank you for joining us in this late hour from Australia. And Vidha, it was really a pleasure to work on this, really.
Likewise.
And I really appreciate, for me it was really like a learning experience, and I hope that we kind of push the borders of this kind of online private space on screen into something else.
Yeah. It really, I think for me, I think this was just such an experience of like kind of softening the space of the webinar, because it always seems like, you know, so
militant,
so strict. Yeah. It really does feel very, and so no, thank you for making this space.
And hope to see you in person soon.
Yes, me too, honestly.
I wish you all a good day, and hope to connect on different channels or in person and so on. Thank you again. Have a lovely day.
Bye. You as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.